Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to a video about a really cool upcoming change. And by cool, I mean potentially awful. No, but actually though, this is something that I think a lot of people have been asking for a very long time. And I think it's really interesting because I wanted to make a video where I gave my opinion, but also I wanted to hear what y'all thought about it. If you guys don't know, if you haven't read the title and all that, basically there is a resist and damage cap coming to Wizard101. Now, we don't really know much about the resist cap yet. The only numbers that we really know is that they're going to be looking at some sort of cap that approaches 70% resist and some sort of cap that approaches 125 damage. So I thought I'd give my opinion on how that might change PvP, what that might look like. I think there's a lot of things to unpack, even just given those numbers. Like, what would it look like if you could only get that high resist and that high damage? I'm gonna start with what I think is actually better in this, which I think is a resist cap. And there's a lot of reasons why I think a resist cap makes more sense than a damage cap. The thing about resist is that it's exponential the way it grows. And what I'm basically saying by that is that it works on a 100% scale. While damage, you can go well above 100% and still get value out of it. Once you're at 100% resist, as long as you have a shield up, there's no point in getting more than 100 resist. So I think focusing on numbers between 70 and 100 is it's a good choice in terms of how you make a resist cap happen. And the fact that they arrived at 70 is something that I actually think makes a lot of sense to me. Now, the reason why I think a 70% resist cap makes sense is because when you look at a school like Ice, with the most resist that it can get without like any additive things, right? And what I mean by that, you know, if they have a resist cap, a 19 resist robe, which is very common for Ice, you know, boots that give resist, and a theme that gives resist, and a normal double resist pet, then you're looking at 70% resist. Now, obviously, we know from the Crit and Black update that the values that we see right now might not be the exact same. There could be, you know, there could be a change where if you wear all of this gear, it's not going to be exactly 70, right? Who knows how they're going to do it? But let's say that nothing changed and this was the maximum resist that you could have. If nothing were to change, I feel like it would be really good for the game, because then people with resist hats and ward would actually not be able to do that anymore. I'm gonna give you guys an example of what I'm talking about, right? Let's say that you're on a life wizard and you struggle against myth. Now, a lot of ways that you could outplay them would involve maybe, I don't know, putting more Aegis shields, using weaknesses more, maybe finding other ways to work, or just, you know, accepting that that matchup is going to be hard. But instead of doing that, what a lot of people do is they have pets like this, which give Fortify and Myth Ward. And by the way, this is without the extra brace jewel, but let's just pretend I had 5 extra resist, right? We'd be looking at 81 resist and a Fortify pet. Now, I think a lot of people think that this is actually normal because it's been around since the beginning of the game. Like, technically, you could have had this resist since the beginning of the game, but I think that's a really easy trap to fall into because, one, turn-based hasn't been here since the beginning of the game. The critical bonus hasn't done 10% and only 10% since the beginning of the game. And the tools that schools have to prevent damage are not the same as they were at the beginning of the game. The Pacify with minions didn't exist at the beginning of the game. So what I'm trying to say is, I think 81 resist with a Fortify pet is a very not strategic way of playing the game, but it exists right now. If I wear a Fortify pet with 81 resist, it would be pretty hard for me to lose against a myth. I'm not saying it's impossible. You could always deck fill, yada yada. You could always have bad RNG. But for the most part, you're basically saying, I have these stats, therefore I win. So a resist cap might actually prevent something like that happening. Now, I don't know exactly how it's going to be. I think there are two ways they could do it. Either they could scale it so that, like, the closer you get to 70, the harder it is to hit 70. Or they could do it where once you hit 70, any extra resist just either becomes invalid or turns into another stat, like flat resist. I think both of those are very good solutions. Either could work. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're trying to cap resist, either add a value for when you go above or make it extremely hard to get to that value to begin with. Either way, it would fix the problem of people having very high resist with Fortify, but I don't think it solves the problem of having very high resist with Fortify if you hit that 70. I think a part of the resist cap should involve Fortify and Brace Jewels in general, because I just think that the way Fortify and Brace work is that they essentially just add to your resist. When you have 70 resist, let's say, let's go back on my Ice for a quick second. Let's say that I were to run these stats, right? Except instead of a Sleet Storm pet, I had a Fortify pet. Then technically, I'm still running an 85 resist setup when the game likes me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that the way Fortify is still a thing in the game kind of makes a resist cap not it. You know what I'm saying, dude? There's still a 15 extra resist that we're not accounting for because of a May cast. Maybe they'll audit the rate of Fortify casts, just like they're going to audit the rate of Reliquary and Galvanic and Virulence. If they do that, then I think it'll be a much, much better update resist-wise. So yeah, definitely not being able to win just because you have set resist, basically Jade levels of resist, or, you know, not winning because your Fortify casts a lot, those are good things that might come to the game. But let's talk about the damage cap. That's where I think things get crazy. Now, the number that I'm super concerned about, and it's one of the main reasons I'm making this video, is because the number that I've heard going around is that there might be a damage cap with 125 damage. That's a huge difference. We're not talking about like 10 resist here and there. A normal fire wizard with, like, look at me, bro. I'm running, like, a double ward pet with a glass cannon hat, right? So, yes, I have very low resist, but the schools that are good, I have decent resist, right? Even when I'm running that, I can get 158 damage. Is that necessarily fair? Maybe not. I would understand why maybe they would want to rein back the damage, because 158 is quite a bit. But from 158 to 125, that I'm not so sure about. And the reason I say that is because gear is way too similar in this game for you to be putting a big cap on damage, because every school can easily get to 125 damage, besides maybe ice. Let's look at the Dragoon Boots, for example, right? The highest damage the Dragoon Boots gives is 36, and the lowest damage that it gives is 30. So between the most offensive school, which is fire, and the most defensive school, which is ice, they've chosen to only give a 6% difference. So considering how accessible damage is to every school in this game, I think it's crazy to cut damage by 35%. I think that would destroy school identity. And I think the thought process behind it is, you know, behind a damage cap anyways, it's to make sure that people aren't just like, you know, winning off of just literally one buff and one open shot because of a deck fail, right? I mean, I think that a lot of people relate to that experience. I know I'm not the only one who goes against a Storm and deck fails, so they're 150 damage and they just obliterate me with the Rusalka. I know I'm not the only one, you know? So basically, reining 150 damage back to 125, it would probably make deck fails less punishing. But I honestly don't think damage is 35% worth of a problem. I think that right now, because of Maycasts and the way buffs work, that's why there's a damage problem in this game. And the math behind this is really, really simple, right? Right now, the way buffs work is that, let's say you have like a Galvanic field cast, right? So that 25% adds on to the multiplier of your 149%. And then let's say you have another buff like a Stormblade. Now, that 25% is added onto something that is multiplied first by your damage and then your blade. When you have something like a buff that's given to you for 4 rounds purely out of RNG, like a Galvanic field, that's when the game has a damage problem. I would be much less scared of a fire if they didn't have a constant chance of having a furnace cast on them the second they overtime or bubble. So to be honest, I'm not really a fan of a damage cap at all. Damage does not work on a 100% scale like resist. Damage just works on a different scale altogether, right? It's just adding damage that can technically be boiled down to 0 if you shield enough. So in my opinion, what they should do is maybe they could have a damage cap of like, I don't know, 140, I think 140 makes some sort of sense, not 125, especially depending on how hard they make it to get to 125. I think that just seems low already. But more importantly, if they really are auditing Maycasts, they should also think about why the Maycasts were such a problem and focus on how buffs multiply in this game. And I know what I'm saying would make some strategies a lot worse. I know there's some strategies where you just blade into the blade or fuel into the fuel and you win because the multiplier just adds up to an insane amount. But if they really are gonna lower everyone's resist a little bit, and even lower everyone's damage a little bit, then you know, I don't think that thinking about multipliers and how buffs work should be out of the conversation. And in fact, I think buffs are a much bigger problem than damage in general. My opinion is that it's way too easy for schools to get close to 125 damage as is, or in other words, it's just way too easy for weak schools to get a ton of damage, that a damage cap doesn't make sense. It is not as easy for people to get very high resist. Storm, Myth, Fire, they can't get high resist unless they have like a double ward pet or something. It's much harder for them. So resist actually makes sense to have a conversation about. But damage, The second you bring everyone down to the same area of damage, that's when school identity becomes irrelevant. A very offensive school like Storm will have around the same damage as, they could potentially have around the same damage as a defensive school like Ice. You know, it's just, I'm not a fan of that at all. So in my opinion, based on this video anyways, I think a resist cap makes an absolute ton of sense. I think an aura audit, the cast rate for Fortify, may cast auras in general, I think those should totally be done. I don't think a damage cap is going to be a good idea, especially if you remove the prevalence of damage auras in PvP. I don't even think damage needs to be looked at compared to resist, because it's just not the same thing. And if you do want to focus on damage, then I think buffs are a better place to start. I don't think buffs should multiply as aggressively as they do. I don't know what would fix that. I don't know how. Maybe all buffs could be based on the original worth of the spell instead of how much it's getting multiplied down the road, if that makes sense. That, you know, like, basically what I'm saying is, like, let's say you have a blade and a galvanic. It's not a plus 25% times another 1.3. It could be a plus 1.25 and then plus another 1.5. You know what I'm saying? Compared to the original damage. Maybe that would fix the damage problem, but I definitely think looking at damage the way that they are right now, I don't know, it makes me a little nervous, man. Guys, I want to hear y'all's opinions on this. What do you guys think of the upcoming resist nerf? And what do you think of the upcoming damage nerf? Do you think both are needed? Do you think one is needed? What do you think is your opinion on this? Let me know in the comments. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and of course, my Patreon. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. So stay awesome. And yeah, y'all.